The sun, a fiery ball of molten gold, slowly descended towards the horizon, painting the endless desert in hues of crimson. The insidious, fine sand burrowed into their pores, grating between their teeth, a harsh reminder of the world's cruelty. Exhausted by the relentless heat and the long trek, Elizabeth wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Her gaze, fixed on the distance, revealed only weariness and a desperate hope, dimly flickering in the depths of her tired eyes. Beside her, gripping her father's revolver tightly, walked her brother, Daniel, his young face set in a grim determination. He was 16 years old, but his gaze held the resolve of a grown man. Behind them, stumbling and barely able to lift their feet, trudged their mother, Sarah, and their younger sister, Mary. Sarah was 39 years old, but the arduous journey and worries had taken their toll. Mary was barely 7, and her eyes, filled with fear, never left her mother's side. They were alone, lost in this merciless world, abandoned by fate. Several weeks ago, they had abandoned their dilapidated home in the east, fleeing the crop failure and famine that had claimed the lives of many of their neighbors. Their only hope was the dream of a new life, of fertile land, which they had been promised somewhere in these lands. But their dreams were shattered by the harsh reality. The journey proved to be full of hardships and countless dangers. Elizabeth's father had succumbed to a fierce fever, and their old wagon, creaking and wheezing, broke down in the middle of a desolate wasteland. They were left alone, face to face with the wild, with hunger, and with despair that gripped their throats in steel clamps. In the distance, against the backdrop of the harsh, rocky mountains, a menacing silhouette darkened. Elizabeth strained her eyes, trying to make out something in the shimmering heat haze. A mine. Abandoned, judging by its appearance, lopsided beams, a gaping black maw of an entrance, as if ready to swallow the travelers. Perhaps shelter from the scorching sun. Perhaps a chance to find even a little life-saving water. Elizabeth's lips whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. There, she indicated with a trembling hand toward a dark spot. Maybe there will find something, even a drop of hope. Daniel nodded, and hope flared in his eyes like a spark. They moved toward the shaft, each step a monumental effort, as though they were wading through a thick, viscous substance. When they drew closer, a grim portal appeared before them, a gaping maw ready to swallow any ray of light. Weather-beaten wooden beams supported the entrance, bearing the marks of faded paint and half-erased inscriptions, like secret messages from bygone years. A piercing wind blew through cracks in the beams, expelling a sinister whisper from the depths of the shaft, murmuring of forgotten secrets and eternal darkness. Inside reigned darkness. A cold, sticky darkness, soaked in the smell of dampness and decay, constricted their lungs, making their hearts beat faster. Elizabeth cautiously stepped inward, a torch dancing in her hand like a living flame. Her family followed, clinging to each other as if seeking protection in a close embrace. The torchlight revealed rusty rails stretching deep, like skeletons of bygone eras, fragments of collapsed rock bearing witness to destructive forces, and remnants of tools, testaments to human labor long forgotten and discarded. Deep within the abandoned mine, in one of the dusty chambers, a strange mural unfolded before them, covering the entire wall. Ancient symbols, depicting enigmatic creatures with disproportionate bodies and distorted faces, intertwined with scenes that instilled terror. Elizabeth's heart gave a painful lurch, sensing impending danger. She acutely felt that this place concealed something dark, something evil, and very ancient. But there was nowhere to retreat. The mine walls seemed to constrict around them, stripping away any hope of salvation. Gathering their remaining strength, they lit a small fire, providing meager warmth, and discovered a little water in an abandoned well, hoping to rest, even if only briefly. But fear, like an icy claw, continued to grip their souls. At night, in the utter darkness, strange sounds reached them, creaks, rustlings, muffled thuds echoing through the narrow corridors. Daniel, not closing his eyes, sat by the fire, tightly clutching a revolver in his hand, ready to shoot at any moment. The following day, continuing to explore the abandoned mine, they stumbled upon an unexpected discovery, an ancient artifact, adorned with rubies, brightly shining in the torchlight, and gold, whose glimmers both fascinated and frightened. Sarah, struck by the unexpected find, picked up the artifact. At that very moment, the depths of the mine shuddered with a roar, and the ceiling began to collapse, burying everything beneath it. Elizabeth, turning at the sound, saw in horror how a huge stone boulder, as if mocking the transience of existence, was falling directly onto her mother. She let out a desperate cry, rushed towards Sarah, but it was too late. The boulder, pinning her, cut short the woman's life. Daniel, like a statue, petrified with grief, stood aside, unable to move. Mary, sobbing uncontrollably, pressed her back against the cold, damp wall, as if seeking solace from it. Elizabeth, through a torrent of bitter tears, tried to free her mother's body from the wreckage, but quickly realized it was an impossible task. Suddenly, feeling a sharp pain in her arm, Elizabeth looked at the artifact Sarah had been holding. It glowed with a frightening, blood-red light. She recoiled, and a sparkling ruby fell from the artifact. She caught a strange whisper emanating from the stone depths of the mine. It was a voice, hissing curses, an ancient evil left in these walls by a long-vanished tribe. A sudden chill ran down her spine, causing Elizabeth to turn around. Standing right behind her was a ghostly figure, the shadow of a woman with coal-black eyes and long, jet-black hair, like in an ancient painting. She understood, they had awakened an age-old curse. The mine seemed to breathe with malice, its darkness thickening with every passing second. In the following days, strange things began to occur within the mine. Mary was tormented by nightmares. She heard voices whispering ominous words. Daniel, isolating himself from everyone, withdrew into himself, consumed by rage, and thirsted for revenge. Elizabeth, exhausted by despair, tried to find a way out, to understand what was happening. She felt how this cursed mine, this curse, was slowly but surely devouring their souls. She sensed they were doomed. One day, Daniel, driven by an insatiable thirst for revenge, decided on a desperate act. He headed deep into the abandoned mine, intending to find the one he believed was responsible for his mother's death. Elizabeth, gripped by fear for her brother, rushed after him, trying to stop him, but it was already too late. Daniel vanished into the darkness, descending into the terrifying abyss of the underground. Deep within the mine, amidst the dampness and oppressive silence, Elizabeth found Daniel. He stood surrounded by ghostly shadows, dancing around him like mocking demons. His eyes burned with madness, betraying his inner pain and rage. A heavy pickaxe gleamed in his hand, and without hesitation, he lunged at his sister. A desperate and brutal struggle began. Elizabeth, defending herself, tried to survive. But fate had other plans. In a frenzy of self-defense, she unintentionally struck a fatal blow. Daniel fell, slain. Elizabeth stood over her brother's body, her soul torn apart by horror and grief. She didn't recognize herself, shocked by what had happened. Her heart was breaking from the realization of what she'd done. The curse was slowly but surely enveloping her. Elizabeth understood that escaping this trap would be impossible. The mine had become her impregnable prison, and the curse, a merciless fate. Gathering her last reserves of strength, she headed towards Mary, who was hiding in one of the distant halls. Her heart was breaking with pain, but she needed to distract herself, even if only for a moment, from the encroaching darkness. She embraced her sister, feeling the fragile body shudder with sobs. Mary wept bitterly, her tears flowing down her cheeks, leaving wet trails on her skin. Elizabeth, experiencing a chilling sense of hopelessness, began to speak. She told her sister about the terrible curse, how they'd fallen into a deadly trap. Her voice trembled, but she tried to speak clearly so Mary would understand the gravity of the situation. She begged her sister to run, to escape the cursed mine while there was still time. Then, summoning all her will, Elizabeth gave Mary the very ruby, warning her it must be destroyed to break the chains of ancient evil. Through a torrent of tears, Mary quietly whispered a promise. Elizabeth remained alone, in a silence heavy with foreboding. She waited, holding her breath. Death seemed her only escape from the torment. In her ears echoed Mary's footsteps, fading away down the dark, winding corridors. Suddenly, the world around her shuddered. The mine's walls seemed to groan, and the ceiling began to collapse. Elizabeth stood motionless, her heart counting down the final moments. A cold breeze brushed her cheek, as if foretelling the inevitable. In that instant, she knew, this was the end. In her final moment, as the stones crashed down, Elizabeth saw Mary, emerging from the dark maw of the mine, running towards the rising sun. A ruby sparkled in her hand, like a drop of frozen flame. A smile touched Elizabeth's lips. The mine, which had claimed so many lives, soon plunged into darkness forever. No one would ever know about the ancient curse, about Elizabeth's fate, about Daniel's tragic love, about Sarah's innocence. Only the wind, piercing through the abandoned tunnels and echoing across the stone vaults, whispered the forgotten story, heard only by the silent, dead stone. Mary, after many long years, would find a way to rid herself of the ruby, to destroy its cursed power. Yet the scar left by this history would remain with her forever. A scar upon her heart, still bleeding with pain and loss. A scar upon her memory, branded by what she had endured and preserving every detail of that terrible night.